Well, the Israeli Defense Force strongly dispute the number of civilian deaths, but the figures have been accurate in previous conflicts, tallying closely with estimates produced later by the United Nations and by the IDF. From Tel Aviv, our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has this.
They have done this more times than they can remember, burying the dead in mass graves with the little dignity that there is left. 40,000 people killed in just over 10 months fighting. Israel disputes that figure, but in truth, it could actually be much higher. How many bodies are lying undiscovered under the vast piles of rubble that Gaza has now become? Many of the dead are Hamas and Islamic Jihad fighters, responsible for Israel's darkest day. But then there are the civilians, the innocent. That emotionless phrase only used in war and by militaries. Collateral damage. For sure, this war is destroying Hamas bit by bit. But it is also wiping out Palestinian families, childhoods, communities, and hope.
They keep talking about negotiations and continue to commit massacre after massacre. I don't believe the war is going to end, not even 1%. I don't have hope at all.
Shay's cousin, Carmel Gat, is a hostage in Gaza. She is believed to be still alive and could be among the first released if a deal is agreed in Doha.
Carmel and all of the 115 hostages are just around the corner. And we have a real chance now to have them back safe at home.
So your fear is that this is the final chance for a deal?
I don't know, I'm afraid. I'm afraid.
One of the sticking points to a deal could be who controls the Philadelphia corridor, the border between Gaza and Egypt. Israeli troops currently occupy it, and Benjamin Netanyahu wants them to remain there to prevent Hamas smuggling weapons back into Gaza. But Hamas is demanding that the IDF withdraw.
Let's be clear, even if reports from Doha today or tomorrow come back and say we've had a quote unquote breakthrough, we're talking here weeks of negotiations over the process and the modalities of how to work out the implementation.
In Tel Aviv tonight, thousands gathered to put pressure on the Israeli government. They don't have much faith in Netanyahu, but believe that this is the best hope they've had for a long time, and perhaps the last chance to agree a deal. The ceasefire talks are expected to last a few days. This time does feel a bit different, but the outcome, an agreement between two leaders, bitter enemies, fighting for their own futures, might still prove impossible.
Well, let's cross now live to Tel Aviv and bring Alistair in. Alistair, look, we heard there and saw from the hostage families. You say that these talks now feel a little bit different. Why so?
Well, because there's so much pressure now on both Hamas and the Israeli government to come to a deal. External pressure from allies of Israel, particularly the United States. But, for example, the British Foreign Secretary David Lammy is here tomorrow with his French counterpart to keep that pressure up, to push for a ceasefire. There's also internal pressure, of course, from the people that we spent time with in Tel Aviv this evening, families of hostages, but also friends and Israelis who want to see a ceasefire. But also within the government and the military itself, top security officials in Israel have made it known that they believe now is the time for a deal. They think that they can cease fire in Gaza and ensure that Hamas don't rebuild during that time. Apparently, the IDF general who is in charge of overseeing the return of hostages briefed Benjamin Netanyahu before he flew as part of the negotiating team to Doha and said that time is running out for the hostages still in Gaza. He said that they could carry on fighting in Gaza and they can continue degrading Hamas, but the longer the war continues, the more likely it is that the hostages who are there won't survive it. So you have pressure from all directions for a deal. The early news we're hearing from the negotiations today is reasonably positive but there is a long way to go, and nobody is taking anything for granted.
OK, Alistair Bunkle for now in Tel Aviv. Thank you for that. Now, 5 people, including 2 doctors, have been charged tonight in connection with the death of the Friends star, the actor Matthew Perry, from a ketamine overdose. Authorities in the US have accused a criminal network of distributing the drug to Perry, who was found dead in a hot tub last October. Now, his family say they look forward to justice taking its course. Let's cross now live to Los Angeles and bring in our US correspondent, Martha Kellner. Martha, look, we saw that news conference given by those officials in LA earlier, and it was quite remarkable, some of the detail that's come down in that indictment.
It certainly is. This has clearly been a very sophisticated investigation by 3 different law enforcement bodies here in the United States. When somebody chooses to do something of their own volition, taking drugs which leads to their death, we tend to hold those people personally accountable for their own actions. But there has been a push by federal authorities here in the United States to pursue people like doctors and drug dealers in connection with those sorts of deaths, in the hope that more overdose deaths can be prevented in the future. You may remember back in 2009, after the very high-profile death of Michael Jackson, his own personal doctor was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter for providing the singer with a large dose of powerful drugs which led to his death. Well, now we have these 5 people charged in connection with Matthew Perry's death, 2 of whom are appearing in court as we speak. Here is our report from Los Angeles. It was a death which rocked Hollywood and millions of fans around the world. Matthew Perry found lifeless, face down in a hot tub at his LA home. Now, police say this was not just a tragic overdose. 5 people, including 2 doctors, have been charged with providing the actor ketamine, the drug that ultimately killed him. In the 2 months before his death, Perry spent $55,000 on 20 vials of ketamine.
These defendants took advantage of Mr. Perry's addiction issues to enrich themselves. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were doing was risking great danger to Mr. Perry, but they did it anyways.
One of those charged is Jasveen Sanger. Prosecutors allege she's a drug dealer, known informally as the ketamine queen. She lived here in Hollywood, prosecutors say operating a drug-selling emporium out of her house, ultimately supplying Perry with the vial of ketamine that killed him. Neighbours are shocked at this connection to Perry's death on their doorstep.
We noticed some weird people coming in and out with briefcases and stuff, and sometimes instrument cases, so I thought it was like musicians too. And then, yeah, one night, like, someone came and like tried to bust her door down, and there was like a lot of commotion in the hallway. It's pretty bizarre. I never really thought that that would kind of be something that I would be like next door to. But yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of surreal and like scary, I guess. I don't know.
Photos from the indictment show ketamine inside a so-called stash house. Ketamine is an anaesthetic drug with psychedelic properties, commonly known as a party drug, but in recent years has been used as an alternative therapy to treat anxiety and depression. Perry had been undergoing a medically improved ketamine therapy course, but became addicted and turned to an underground network.
As Matthew Perry's ketamine addiction grew, he wanted more, and he wanted it faster and cheaper. That is how he ended up buying from street dealers who sold the ketamine that ultimately led to his death.
An urgent care doctor allegedly worked to get ketamine to Perry despite knowing he was an addict. In a text exchange with another defendant, also a doctor, Salvador Plasencia discussed supplying Perry with drugs. He wrote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay, and let's find out." The charge sheet alleges the defendants would use coded language to discuss drug deals, including referring to bottles of ketamine as Dr. Pepper, cans and bots. Perry's family praised police for pursuing the suspected drug dealers. In a statement, they said, "We were and still are heartbroken by Matthew's death, but it's helped to know law enforcement has taken his case very seriously. We look forward to justice taking its course." Two of the defendants appeared in court today to hear the charges against them. At the centre of this case, an actor who entertained millions, but whose death was sad, lonely, and now potentially criminal. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Los Angeles.
Well, Sky News understands that British tanks operated by Ukrainian soldiers have been used inside Russia for the first time. Ukraine's surprise incursion into Kursk is now well into its second week, and it shows no sign of being pushed back. Russia's defence minister said today they've implemented new measures to defend the border regions of Bryansk, Kursk and Belgorod with a counter-terror operation declared. But Ukraine has continued to advance through Russian defensive lines that are shown here in red, taking full control of the town of Sudzha. Now, as Russia scrambles to reinforce, satellite imagery shows new trenches being dug almost 30 miles into Russia. Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, reports.
On the road to Russia, there's heavy traffic. An indicator that Ukraine's big gamble to invade its neighbour is just getting started.
Ukraine's high-risk operation has got some high-value weapons. I've been told Ukrainian forces have used British Challenger 2 tanks inside Russia. It's the first time these tanks have been deployed in combat on Russian soil.
This footage is of a Challenger 2 in Ukraine after the UK first allowed Kyiv to use its armour last year. Moscow viewed that move as a provocation, let alone their presence within its own borders. British troops have also trained Ukrainian crews on the tanks in the UK. Asked about the use by Ukraine of Challenger 2s in Russia, the Ministry of Defence declined to comment on any operational detail. Inside Russia's new war zone, its forces are fighting back. Any invading vehicle is a target. But Ukraine claims its troops are still advancing and have fully captured a key town.
General Syrsky reported on the completion of the liberation of the town of Sudzha from the Russian military. A Ukrainian military office is being established there. Several other settlements have also been liberated.
Yet the assault comes at a price on the Ukrainian side of the border. Residents say the blast from a likely Russian glide bomb shattered their homes on Wednesday. Vera tells me she was terrified, but at least most of her house is still standing.
There was an explosion. All the edging flew off. Everything got covered in dust. Dust everywhere. I screamed for my daughter.
Despite the danger, she says she's not planning to leave.
What can I do? This is my home, and I have my little ducklings, and the smaller ones too. Scared or not, we have to live.
A simple fact in this hard reality. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, in the Sumy region, northeastern Ukraine.
Well, for hundreds and thousands of teenagers up and down the country, today was a big day as they got their A-level results. And for many, it was good news with a rise in the number of top grades awarded. 27.8% of students received A's or A stars, up slightly on last year and above pre-pandemic levels. But the overall pass rate has fallen slightly to 97.2%. That is lower than last year and lower than 2019. Well, maths remains the most popular subject, up 11% on last year, but the inequality gap doesn't seem to be closing. Someone who gets a university place is more than twice as likely to come from the least deprived 20% of the country than the most deprived, which follows a 10-year trend. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso reports.
Oh my God, A.
The ritual of results, a day of dread that can become delight. A-level students achieved similar results to last year, despite grading returning to post-COVID norms for the first time, with more candidates than ever choosing maths and sciences.
We've done it overall, we've done really well. So we've got a consistent performance compared to last year. So we've had a 98% pass rate for our A-levels and 100% pass rate for our vocational courses, which is exceptional for our students.
For many, results are followed by a call to clearing.
We can't guarantee that straight progression from A to B.
Here at Coventry University, they've more than 1,000 places to fill, part of a national scramble for students in a sector under huge financial pressure. Fees paid by British students don't cover the cost of their education. They've been frozen at £9,250 for 7 years. If they'd risen in line with inflation, that would cost £12,000 today. So British universities make up the gap from overseas students. They make up 26% of the student population, but they pay 46% of the fees. The problem is that overseas applications are falling. The impact, say university leaders, of visa restrictions that make it harder to come here to study.
The narrative that the previous government pushed out was very much anti students seeking visa. I think it's really foolish. Almost all of those international students, when their visa completes, return home. It's not their intention to stay. And they add so much to UK higher education. The new government is reviewing the visa regime, but there are no promises on funding.
I recognise the concern that young people feel around the issue of university funding, and I recognise the concerns of the sector too. After 14 years, the system's in a mess. The previous government kicked the can down the road, and we will need to take the time to make sure we get this right.
As this year's students look forward to their next steps, they won't need a degree to realise the current model is unsustainable. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Coventry.
Now, Sweden's confirmed the first case of the new variant of mpox in Europe as health officials in the UK say they're preparing for potential cases here too. The World Health Organization yesterday declared the mpox outbreaks in Africa a global health emergency. So just how worried should we be about the infection? Our science correspondent Thomas Moore has been looking at the data.
The rapid spread of a lethal version of mpox in Africa and now to Europe is causing increasing alarm. The World Health Organization has declared it a public health emergency of international concern, calling for urgent action to bring it under control. Mpox, previously known as monkeypox, causes fever, rash and lesions, severe headaches and fatigue. Some people have difficulty breathing or swallowing, and there is a risk of life-threatening sepsis or blood poisoning. So far this year, there have been more than 17,500 cases in at least 13 African countries. That's up from 15,000 for the whole of 2023. But it's a situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo that triggered the WHO's warning. There have been more than 15,000 cases this year and more than 500 deaths. Just over 2/3 of the cases in the DRC are children under 15. The fatality rate is almost 9% in babies under the age of 1 and approximately 4% in older children. The outbreak in the DRC is being driven by a new version of the virus.
In 2022, we saw mpox in the UK, and that occurred largely as a result of sexual transmission and also direct contact transmission. And there were more than 3,000 cases in the UK in 2022. This clade 1 virus, though, is more concerning because it has been expanding very rapidly. It appears to be more transmissible, and it's associated with a higher mortality rate.
There is a vaccine against mpox, but it's not clear how effective it would be to the new variant, and only 200,000 doses are available. The African Centres for Disease Control says 10 million are needed. By declaring a public health emergency of international concern, the WHO hopes to accelerate access to testing, vaccines and drugs. Without rapid action, it fears the virus could go global.
Now, returning to the United States, in Huntington in Virginia was once known as the overdose capital of America, ground zero for the nation's opioid crisis, the consequence of 81 million painkillers being pumped into the city's pharmacies over an 8-year period. But now there are signs the cycle of addiction is being broken by communities coming together as people who hit rock bottom seek to turn around the lives of others. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has this special report.
It is easy to come to a place like this and see just hopelessness, because there are pockets of it everywhere. In that sense, this could be one of so many American communities. But spend a little longer, looking a bit closer, And it turns out this particular place is bucking a grim trend.
I'm Brandon Christopher McMillan, and I've been now clean for 4 months.
I've been here in recovery for 7 months now.
And I've been in recovery for 64 days.
Huntington, West Virginia, lies on the Ohio River, at the point where 3 states meet. The overdose capital of America, at least that's what they used to call it, flooded by doctors with opioids, miracle painkillers which created communities of addicts. Well, now, all over town, there are recovery centres. Brandon Scarberry is the boss at Recovery Point, a place he knew long before he ran it.
You remember all this because you did it yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it like it was yesterday. There's no question about it.
With a capacity of 100, the centre is almost full, with young men like Brandon McMillan at the start of his journey to sobriety.
And what was it that made you decide, enough, I need to be here?
When you lose everything and you're completely at your rock bottom, you have nowhere to go, you lose all family, they all give up on you, and that's not what I want.
There is nothing sophisticated or clinical about this place. It's basic, grassroots, run by people who know what it's like to be addicted. It's free, but with reminders of the price of addiction.
We call it the death board, and a lot of times it hits home for a bunch of people because they come in, they know these people on the wall. They went to school with them, they were in prison with them, they were in jail with them.
You do recovery dynamics, which is...
Stephen is a little bit further along the path, and you can see it in his face.
What does this place mean for you?
It saved my life. I really believe that with all my heart. I actually worked in the coal mines, and the pill epidemic, where it was just a really big thing in the mines, giving coal miners the Oxycontins, and that's what led to really my addiction. And then it progressed once the pills were gone. It kind of changed on the streets, and heroin came around, and that's how I got pulled into doing drugs.
Painkillers, street drugs, crime, jail, repeat. Here, they're breaking that cycle by themselves. Overdoses are now counted by the week, not by the day. It's step by step, and they must do it from the beginning.
My name's Christina Sargent, and I have 5 years in recovery.
Because the unborn here are victims too.
When I would go through the physical withdrawal symptoms of not having heroin and fentanyl, he stopped moving completely.
And he stopped moving because he was in withdrawal as well?
Yes, he was in withdrawal. In my stomach.
Come here, Bobby.
Christina now works here, helping so many other mums.
Because I know there's mothers out there that are afraid to get help. And not just mothers alone, but there's people out there walking the streets that don't even realize this is a treatment center.
The lesson for so many American communities is from those who know how hard it is to beat addiction, but how possible it is too. Mark Stone, Sky News in West Virginia.
Now, a 15-year-old boy has become the first person to be charged with the more serious offence of rioting linked to the recent unrest across England and Northern Ireland. The teenager, who can't be named for legal reasons, is accused of riot after disorder in Sunderland. The charge carries a maximum sentence of 10 years, double that of the charge of violent disorder. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have begun a 4-day visit to Colombia. The former working royals were welcomed by the Vice President in Bogota before visiting a school and enjoying a performance from a local dance group. They are then set to travel beyond the capital and visit the cities of Cartagena and Cali in the next few days. Well, Taylor Swift has returned to Wembley tonight, taking the stage for the first time since being forced to cancel her run of concerts in Austria because of an alleged terror plot. Well, tonight also marks her first performance since 3 little girls were stabbed to death in Southport last month while attending a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. Ashna Horenegg reports.
After weeks away, this was her dazzling return to the capital. Taylor Swift back at Wembley to mark the end of the European leg of her tour.
Taylor Swift!
This performance was highly anticipated as the first since 3 of her shows were cancelled in Vienna last week. Austrian police arrested 3 teenagers after discovering an alleged terror plot targeting the sellout concerts. In London, existing security measures such as bag restrictions and metal detectors remained in place, but the Met were out reassuring those attending.
They posted everything that they were going to do extra to keep us safe. I don't think Taylor would come on if it wasn't safe for us.
So my bag got checked twice in Box Park as walking in, so that was just in there. So we don't know what it's going to be like in there.
The capital venue is no stranger to huge events and crowds.
Some security rules are impacting Swift fans more than others. Traditionally, non-ticket holders have been allowed to stand outside venues and sing along. But Wembley Stadium officials have been clear. This time round, once the show gets underway, no one is allowed to stand outside.
This performance also holds extra significance for those remembering events in Southport. 6-year-old BB King, Elise Aguiar and Elsie Stankham, both 9 and 7, were stabbed during a Taylor Swift-themed dance workshop almost 3 weeks ago. News of their deaths had reached the singer within hours, who said at the time she was at a complete loss for how to ever convey her sympathies to their families. The girls on the minds of those heading inside.
We can't let it stop these bad people from stopping us doing good things.
I think it will have really affected her, and I think a lot of the fans have been really affected as well.
Southport was absolutely terrible, you know, we all feel for that, and I think we all feel that pain as Taylor Swift fans, especially with it being such young girls.
After a difficult few weeks for the singer and her fans, these final nights mark her UK farewell after a Swiftie summer many won't forget. Ashna Harinag, Sky News in Wembley.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in our press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the columnist from the Belfast Telegraph, Alison Morris, and by the writer and broadcaster, Esther Grayku. Guys, thanks for being with us. Among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Mirror, after the news that 5 people have now been charged in the United States in connection with the death of the actor Matthew Perry. The Mirror's headline: